Hi everyone, I'm Bridget, I'm from the US and I love learning languages. And recently I tried to learn the basics of a brand new language in the span of 7 days. This was to prepare for my trip to Cambodia, so I took 6 lessons of Khmer. I wanted to learn enough of the language to be able to order coffee or dinner in Khmer, to be able to greet people, to just not be completely clueless walking around in Cambodia. And overall, I would say that it was pretty successful for my particular goals. So now that I'm back, I've tried to distill all of my thoughts on the entire experience. These are things that you can apply to language learning if you too need to learn the very basics of a language in a short amount of time. This is really geared for people who are traveling or going on vacation and want to learn some of the local language, because that's always a wonderful thing to do. Locals love it. It shows consideration, it's polite, and it's fun. So these tips are geared towards that situation. Lesson number 1 is do not start at the beginning. And what I mean by that is do not feel that you need to start at the very beginning and learn all of the basic vocabulary like the pen is on the table. My favorite color is green. I have 1 sister and 1 brother. All of that is great if you're actually trying to learn and study the language, but if you're preparing for a trip, for example, these aren't things that you're going to be using, so don't be afraid to skip them. Talking about what music you like to listen to doesn't really come up when you're on vacation talking with locals. For example, I never learned or studied asking for the time or telling the time, because in this day and age, people don't often ask each other the time. They just look at their watches or look at their phones. So why spend time and effort trying to learn this when you're never going to use it? So do not be afraid to hyper-focus on exactly what you will need. Forget about everything else. I wrote down some topics of what I experienced most on my trip. So if you're going on a trip, these are things that I would recommend you focus on. It's not an exhaustive list, but I would recommend things like greetings, things like hello, how are you, where are you from? Ordering at a cafe, ordering at a restaurant, food words, beverage words, numbers in the amounts of the local currency. So in Cambodia, they accepted US dollars. And so I learned numbers 1 through 10, and that pretty much covered me wherever I needed to ask the price for something. But if you go somewhere where the currency is in the thousands, you might want to learn the thousands words, plus numbers 1 through 10 just to be safe. Things like how to get somewhere, I am looking for, direction words. Depending on how you travel, you might want to learn some public transportation words, things like buses, trains, ferries. For a full rundown of everything I learned from my trip, I will link to the video where I show the progression starting from 0 to what I ended up with, and that shows pretty much all of the topics that we covered. In those videos, you will see my teachers were absolutely amazing. They hyper-focused on the subjects they knew would come up visiting Cambodia, things like talking to tuk-tuk drivers, ordering at restaurants. They didn't try to make sure that I understood every grammar rule. They just wanted to make sure I could say the sentences and understand the answers. And to be honest, I was quite shocked at how much I was able to absorb and memorize when I was only focusing on absorbing and memorizing and not trying to understand the grammar of the language. Because again, this was just for a vacation. I just wanted to be able to use it for very specific contexts. So that was a long-winded way of saying to tailor your learning to you. Do not be afraid to skip ahead. Focus on exactly the vocabulary and the sentences that you're going to use. You take what you learn at face value. You don't need to understand the why. Just understand this is how you say blank. Lesson number 2, I had not even thought of this beforehand, but now I recommend this to everyone. Role play is everything. One of my teachers was so amazing. She would actually act out being a tuk-tuk driver addressing me. She would act out being the barista asking my coffee order. She would act out being the waitress coming over to my table to take my order. At first it felt a little silly, like play acting with your teacher, but when I actually got to Cambodia, these scenes played out almost exactly like we had practiced. And I didn't freeze, I didn't panic, I knew what to say because I'd done it before, not just on paper, but out loud with another person. It's so great to build your confidence using the language. Once you've told your teacher how you like your coffee, you're not going to be afraid to tell the real barista how you like your coffee. So practice full conversations through role play. It builds muscle memory, it removes fear, and it so beautifully prepares you for the real thing. So I guess this is a 2-part recommendation. Number 1 is take lessons with a teacher, and number 2 is don't be afraid to ask your teacher, can we actually act these things out? It's just the best thing ever. Tip number 3 is to be in charge of your own destiny. By that, I mean, when it comes time to actually use the language in the real world, when you're on your trip finally, be bold, speak the language, even if you butcher it. In Cambodia, people would greet me in English, and I would respond back to them in Khmer. I made it a bit of a rule. If I knew how to say something in Khmer, I would say it in Khmer. Even if the other person was addressing me in English, I'm still going to try and practice the Khmer that I learned. Was it awkward sometimes when someone would ask me a question and then I'm stumbling through my answer trying to remember the right word? Yes. But when you're actually on your trip, you're faced with two options. If someone talks to you in English, you answer back in English, and then you only ever speak English, and then you never get to practice this language that you spent all this time studying, or force the language into the conversation, use it as often as you can. It's a no-brainer. Don't let other people speaking English or your native language to you be the reason that you never get to practice this new language. Not only do people kind of light up when they see that you're trying to speak their native language, it's also just incredibly rewarding. It shows all of your effort was worth it. You're using the language in the country where it's spoken. You sort of feel like you're flying if you're into languages like I am. So again, look for any opportunity to use the language, be bold and actually use it, even if people are speaking to you in English. Because if you don't, you'll never get to use it. Do you really want to go home at the end of your trip and think, well, I sort of said hello to one person at one time in the language? Or do you want to go home and be able to say, wow, I interacted with baristas, with waiters, with taxi drivers, with little kids in the playground? Create the life experience that you want to have had. One more thing, not a tip necessarily, more just an observation that I recognized. I caught myself copying my teacher's tone, her intonation, her cadence. It was like I was borrowing her voice and personality when I would speak Khmer, which is kind of funny. Like, I'll look at footage of myself and be like, that sounds exactly like my teacher. That was not my voice. I was mimicking my teacher. But weirdly, it helped me speak naturally more quickly because my teacher is a native speaker of Khmer. And so when I was copying her way of saying things, it was a natural way to say things in Khmer, if that makes sense. So if I want to distill a tip from this, it will be, don't be afraid to adopt the cadence and way of speaking of your teacher. It's okay to borrow someone else's expressions for the purpose of getting to use a language. So, did I become fluent in a language in 7 days? Absolutely not. And I don't recommend trying. But did I become functional in some very specific contexts? Absolutely. I was comfortable enough to use Khmer in Cambodia, and I had so many amazing interactions where I got to practice, and that made the trip so much better. Truly one of the better life experiences I've had to date. Language learning is often not so much about perfection, but about connection, communication, and I hope these tips help get you to the point where you feel comfortable using the basics of a language in a short amount of time. This marks the end of my series on learning Khmer because I'm going back to focusing on Spanish, Español. I hope you'll stick around. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.